it's easy for people to dismiss video games as a waste of time. Some argue it's all made-up numbers and pixels on a screen. Sure, people could say the same about movies and books, but I think those mediums are more respected than video games are. Books, and to a lesser extent, movies, are seen as an art form, but some people don't look at games in the same way. If you play games as a hobby, you've likely encountered this and been frustrated. Still, I understand why people who don't play games think this way, even if I disagree. Video games aren't just a storytelling medium. There's also this gameplay and progression that isn't controlled or pre-written by the designers. And doesn't that get in the way of good storytelling and art? My answer is no. The fact that video games do more than just tell a story can be a challenge. People don't play games just because there's a theme or an emotion that's expressed. But because of this, video games can be special. If a designer can really get you invested in a world or set of goals, if they can really get you to care about the characters and stakes, then you can be more than just a passive consumer. You get to be a part of a story and world, and often you can shape it for yourself. And if you combine this strong player investment and connection with a great story, the themes and experiences can be incredibly meaningful and beautiful in a unique way. Today, we're going to talk about how that happens. The first thing to remember is that getting a player to care about your world and goals requires more than just a good story. So first we have to discuss the game design choices that make good stories possible. I'll start with a really simple example. Getting Over It is a game about climbing a mountain. Seems easy enough? Well, the catch is that you're a half-naked man stuck in a metal pot swinging a hammer around. The game is incredibly difficult. The controls and movement are unlike any game you've ever played, and there are no checkpoints or takebacks to anything. You are constantly at risk of losing everything with a long plummet to the ground. You see, I don't even think it's the difficulty that makes Getting Over It unique per se. It's the constant high stakes. In a lot of games, all that's ever at stake is a few minutes of progress. But one mistake in Getting Over It can bring you back to ground zero, literally. Because of this, there are sections you might replay 5, 10, or even 50 times. Is it frustrating? Yes. But though it may be difficult, every inch of progress is earned, and the feeling of satisfaction you get is greater because of that. In fact, the creator and narrator of the game, Bennett Foddy, explained some of it himself early on in the climb. This game is an homage to a game that came out in 2002 titled Sexy Hiking. In it, your task is to simply drag yourself up a mountain with a hammer. That act of climbing, in the digital world or in real life, has certain essential properties that give the game its flavor. No amount of forward progress is guaranteed. Some cliffs are too sheer or too slippery, and there's a sense of truth in that lack of compromise. Most obstacles in video game worlds are fake. You can be completely confident in your ability to get through them once you have the correct method, or the correct equipment, or just by spending enough time. In that sense, every pixelated obstacle in Sexy Hiking is real. In my words, if the stakes of a game aren't real, then neither are the goals or themes. There's an important idea I'm going to come back to later, namely that a lot of meaning and motivation to play a game comes from making the player care about goals. And often, the theme or themes of the game relate to how the player has to accomplish the goals, what challenges they overcome, what strategies are required, and how the story and world of the game react to the player accomplishing these goals. A consequence of this that may already be obvious to you is that no matter how good you are at writing or making engaging gameplay, if you can't get the player to care about the goals in your game, there's no way in hell that they will care about anything else. Making players care about goals in a game can be a really complex thing, but in this case, Getting Over It uses constant high stakes to do so. You have one simple and unyielding goal: make it to the top of the mountain. It may be difficult, but the unyielding challenge and real risk that underlies it makes every swing of your hammer feel important. There are other ways to make goals feel important and worth striving for. I think choice can be really important here. When every path and choice is set in stone from the beginning, it can make you feel like your actions don't matter. Traditionally, themes are often found in how the world of the story reacts to your main character's actions, and how, in turn, the main character reacts to the world. But in very linear games, the game world and story quite literally don't care about anything the player does. Nothing they do can break them out of the deterministic mold they're put into. Now, of course, you can still make very good linear games, don't get me wrong, but there can also be value in exploring worlds outside of that. I think Hollow Knight is an example of a game that gives you freedom to decide how to accomplish the goals before you. Hollow Knight is a difficult Metroidvania. If you have never played a Metroidvania, typically you have a world to explore how you choose, but there are lots of paths and areas blocked off until you gain certain abilities. This way there is freedom to make decisions, but also some ways to guide player progression. Now, there are a million good things to say about Hollow Knight, but the reason this is relevant here is that Hollow Knight doesn't start with anything story heavy. You get a cryptic cutscene and are thrown into the world bare. The overarching goals or plot are largely a mystery, but that doesn't matter because at the beginning of the game you get to make your own goals and chart your own path. There are some things that point you in important directions, but you also have a lot of freedom to explore and fight whatever you want. This freedom gets me invested in the world. It makes me feel like I have agency, and now I care about what the game has to offer. I think if the game started with unloading everything on you, this wouldn't be the case. But now, by the time you've explored a little bit and are shown some important goals, you already care about the world, and now you can use your freedom to attack these goals in whatever way you see fit. And even when you are given clear direction, like to destroy the 3 Dreamers, you aren't really told how. You can tackle them in any order and focus on them immediately, or explore more carefully first. The world is so large, and there's so much to explore that every playthrough of the game is different, and the freedom really adds on to the feeling of mystery they instill in you. The lore and purpose of everything isn't clear at the beginning, and the game is so open, but that only made me more motivated to understand what's going on and progress the game further. Another good way to demonstrate the power of freedom is by looking at it in isolation. If freedom can create meaningful and goal-driven gameplay on its own, then surely it can be powerful in more story-driven games too. If you ask for a limitless game, I think there's no better answer than Minecraft. In Minecraft, the artist isn't Mahjong or Microsoft. They give you a blank canvas, and then you get to be the artist. Because of this, Minecraft can't really have traditional themes, and it's not trying to. But even though there's nothing the game forces you to do, the player still creates their own goals. Why? Because players aren't stupid, and given freedom they can create their own goals and worlds. There might not be some overarching point that unites every Minecraft world, but the choices you make, the creative expression available, and the time and effort you put into each world makes each playthrough matter to you. Now of course, some games have something to say. They can't all be as open as Minecraft, but the same principles can be applied. Some games have to be linear, but when they don't, a lot is gained in giving players freedom. If you want to make a game that feels meaningful to the player, maybe you can start by making them care about your world. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was my first Zelda game. Because of this, in the beginning, I wasn't really attached to anything. I didn't care about the story or characters. I think in Breath of the Wild, everyone best remembers the massive living world they got to explore. But at first, even that didn't get to me. All I cared about was getting stronger. I'd explore the map and do side missions, but it was all a means to an end. However, Hyrule is huge, and it feels like everywhere you turn, there's a new secret to discover. This changed my attitude in the game, because as I journeyed to find better armor or more shrines, I was forced to meet more characters and explore the nooks and crannies of the world. And in that process, I fell in love with Hyrule. With a newfound zeal for exploration and all the little secrets and side missions, something funny happened. The world was so good that it gave life to every part of the game, even things that seem unrelated. The story and lore of the game, that I didn't care all that much about at first, took on an air of importance. I really did feel like I was on a quest to save places and people that mattered to me. This journey, both the literal one in the game, and the emotional one that I took as I became more attached to the kingdom, is still what makes Breath of the Wild one of my favorite games of all time. We've talked a lot about general game design decisions that make players more invested in games, and in turn, makes them more interested in the story and open to the themes. Now it's time to broaden our focus from pure gameplay to where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and the plot and characters become important. I think a great place to look at this is Toby Fox's Undertale. A quick note here, if you want to avoid spoilers for the neutral route of Undertale, skip to the timestamp displayed on screen. There are two main things I want to talk about here, and the first is character. Plot may be what happens in a story, but almost everything that happens is shaped by and understood through the lens of characters. Everything is influenced by what characters want, what they need, how they feel about each other, and how all of these factors put them into conflict. Without this, you have only events, without a framework to understand them. Furthermore, the more an audience cares about characters, the more they care about the events in the plot that affect them. So how does Undertale use characters so effectively? Well, first, almost everyone you encounter in this game, though they are monsters, are also humanized. Even the ones that want to fight you. No one is without motivation. Toriel fights you because she wants you to be safe. Papyrus wants to capture you so he can have friends and join the Royal Guard. Undyne wants to take your soul to Asgore. Alphys makes Mettaton to fight you because she wanted to be a part of your adventure and convince you to stay in the underground. And even King Asgore doesn't want to kill you, but without your soul, the monsters will never be able to escape from the underground. Asgore feels like murder is the only way to break his people out of their hopeless situation. With such real motivations for the characters, the monsters in this game don't feel evil. Even out of self-defense, it's hard to kill them because you don't want to be their enemy, you want to be their friends. This all connects to the second thing I wanted to talk about. Specifically, the choices that you get to make in Undertale. In Undertale, there are decisions that you make with the typical text boxes, but also every fight you have is a choice, to kill or to spare. What's interesting to me about this is that you don't even understand the power and impact of your actions when you first make them. For example, I spared the first bosses of the game, Toriel and Papyrus, just because they seemed nice. But as you learn more about the backstory of the world, you realize the huge choice you have on your hands. You need to kill the beloved King Asgore if you want to go home, and Asgore needs to kill you if he wants to free his people from their underground prison. The fate of the world is in your hands, and for me at least, I felt like a judge. The monsters have so much hope and faith in their King Asgore, and it's hard not to care about them. But you also know that if they escape, not only will you die, but the monsters may wipe out the humans. Everything in the story seems to push you into conflict with someone you don't want to fight. For me, I knew quickly in my first playthrough that I had to spare everyone. But you might have had a different experience, and that's great. The world of Undertale feels real, and your choices feel meaningful because it's one of the rare games where they are. And when you get past it all and find your ending, the determination you were told to have feels worth it. You are a part of the story, and that connection with the main character, the feeling that your actions affect the fate of everyone, that's something special in a game. Above all, it's an amazing way to pull the player into the game and make them care about the world, the goals in it, and its themes. If you want to avoid Celeste spoilers, skip to this timestamp displayed on screen. The final game I'll discuss today is Celeste, because I think it demonstrates how to make sure the game design meshes with the story. In Celeste, you play a woman named Madeline who wants to climb Celeste Mountain. What I love most about this game is that the player experience always reinforces Madeline's experiences and emotions, and by the end of the game, you can really empathize with her. Celeste starts as you'd expect. You simply start climbing the mountain. But Celeste isn't just about Madeline's external climb up the mountain. It's about her struggle with parts of herself. Normally, things like that aren't literal, but in Celeste, it is. In the second level, you find a mirror, and a part of Madeline breaks out of it. They are instantly put into conflict, because her reflection doesn't want to climb the mountain. As the game progresses, Madeline is determined, but she keeps butting heads with her reflection. Eventually, Madeline and a fellow climber, Theo, make it to a temple, but the part of her is still there. Now, Theo ends up sucked into Madeline's problems. Literally. Madeline knows the monsters are her own, but she can't control them. Thankfully, she rescues Theo, and as they recover, Madeline opens up about her struggles with depression and anxiety. It's made her feel lost, and she hints at the events in her past that brought this out. She says she just can't move on from them. She also wants to destroy the part of herself she keeps fighting. In the morning, she confronts her reflection. She tells her that she embodies all of her negative traits. Madeline tells her reflection that she's everything she needs to leave behind. But the reflection fights back, and she sends Madeline falling all the way back down the mountain. Madeline is devastated, and when she gets a chance to reflect, she says, "Why won't she leave me alone? I hate her." After all, you've spent the whole game up to this point getting so close to the peak, but now a part of Madeline has ruined it. All of your progress has been lost, and Madeline feels trapped with herself. But after Madeline talks to the old lady, she starts to realize that maybe the piece of herself is just scared. If she can't destroy this part of herself, maybe she needs to work with it. And after a dramatic confrontation, that's exactly what they do. This time, Madeline works with her reflection, and they ascend the mountain faster than ever before. When they finally reach the summit, it's beautiful, and it's worth it. It may sound cheesy, but Madeline's story really moved me. For one, you experience everything alongside her, both in the story and in the gameplay. Her falls are your falls, and her victories are your victories. Secondly, I think the writers were really good at making her struggles feel personal, and to an extent, relatable. I might not be a mountain climber battling mirror versions of myself, but the idea of fighting with parts of who you are, with wanting to destroy them, with wanting to keep them hidden from others, that's not an imaginary problem. And as Madeline finally talks with herself, as she seeks to understand and work with herself instead of fighting herself, I felt hopeful. Maybe I too could stop fighting. The reason I care isn't just because of the story though, it's because of the gameplay that always connects to the story. When Madeline runs from herself metaphorically, she runs from herself literally. When she argues with herself, you have to deal with the consequences and fall all the way down the mountain. And when she learns to work with herself, to understand her reflection, you climb faster and better than ever before. This connectedness between the emotional and thematic things Madeline is going through with the physical things you navigate as a player is amazing, and it's what makes Celeste such a masterclass in effective storytelling. Look, I know I'm just a random nerd making videos on YouTube. Plus, talking too much about themes can make you sound like you're an English teacher, torching your students by overanalyzing stories. But stories do matter, and we've been telling them for a long time for a reason. I said video games aren't just a storytelling medium, but that doesn't have to be bad for stories. In a video game, you can be a part of the story. You go on a journey with the protagonist, you improve your skills with time and persistence, and in doing so, you shape your character and the world around them. There's sometimes a pre-designed story, one made for you, but there's also a story you make, and meaning that's unique to you. No matter who you are, every decision you make, act of creativity or use of skill leaves a mark on the world. Games can just be entertainment, but I think in their own small way, they can be a part of our experiences. Even though I've never met most of you, the stories we craft and experience, the things we build as a community, they bring us together for a moment. Don't you think that's worth preserving? I want to give a huge thanks to my editor for putting my video together, and a thanks to my friend, Twisty, for reading through my script. Check out my editor's Twitch and YouTube channel in the description. If I said anything dumb, let me know in the comments, and if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. This has been Preserved Moment. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.